Hello, my name is Blade, and I'm really uncomfortable right now, so there better be some comments about how good I look. But also, today I will be reviewing Eddington. I'm going to start off this review by saying I really hate to be this critical of an Ari Aster movie, but I'm just gonna warn you before I really get into like the thick of this review that y'all, this is honestly a really rough watch. So Eddington is the brand new film by American filmmaker Ari Aster. If you don't know that name, just by hearing it, some of his work includes Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid. So some pretty big hits, I'd say, especially amongst the A24 girlies, if you will. So going into this film, myself, and I do like Ari Aster's work. But I personally like seeing the trailers and stuff and hearing about it from film festivals. I wasn't disinterested. This just wasn't personally on my like most anticipated list, but like I was still interested, so that's the mind frame that I went in with. But yeah, this was it was a film. It was a film. So, Eddington. The premise is during the COVID-19 pandemic, a standoff between a small town sheriff and mayor sparks a powder keg as neighbor is pitted against neighbor in Eddington, New Mexico. So, I guess disclaimer, I definitely have reviewed films on this channel before that I wasn't like over the moon about. However, I was still like lukewarm on them. I was still like medium. They were like 3 out of 5 movies for me still. But this is the first time that I'm gonna have to be, I think, like a lot more critical. And I don't want to be straight up negative. That's not the intent of this channel. But I do want to be honest in my reviews. So I'm going to warn that this is gonna be pretty critical, and I feel really bad doing with an Ari Aster movie. He is a director that I like, but unfortunately this just did not work for me. But of course, let's get into it, first starting off with spoiler free. Yeah, so as I've kind of already made very clear in this honestly like low-key lengthy intro, it's just the first thing I have in my notes is it literally just says girl ... because I think the biggest thing I really have to say here is this is a 2-hour and like 35-minute film, and you really feel that the writing and the pacing honestly does not earn that timestamp. I never do this in the movie theater, like ever. I never check my watch to see like how much film is left or what time it is, and I was doing that several times throughout this film. And I also don't usually do this during films, but I was sitting there, I was like, roll the credits, like come on, like roll the credits. And every single time I was just so like, how is there this much movie left? Like this movie really could have been like an hour 45. It did not need to be 2 hours and a half. It just honestly, the story does not warrant that, and it could have, like the premise, if it was different, could have warranted that, but it just, unfortunately, it really does not. It was to the point where, I paid my money, so I decided to watch the whole movie. I know I was going to do this review, so I decided to watch the whole movie, but there were several points where I was like, honestly, like I wanted to just get up, and the other person that was in the theater with me did in fact get up and leave. And I thought we were like an hour into the movie. We're only 45 minutes into the movie, so he saw like 30% of the movie. But let's talk about something that I did like while we're in spoiler free, because I don't want this to be, completely harsh. Great direction, Ari Aster's a great director. Now, unfortunately, the great direction is not enough to save it, because the great direction moments are far spread out across each other, and since the rest of the movie is just so, like, I really hate to use this word, but like lackluster, um when a cool shot or like a great directing choice happens, there's some stuff that like I really appreciate, and normally I'd be like, oh my god, like this is great, but every time a cool directing moment happened, I was just kind of like, okay, like that was cool, but it being in this just really bland plot, it just felt like, but that being said, there was great direction as always, but just not enough to like boost it up that much, unfortunately. So I think what also did not work for me is this is a very political and like societal commentary film. I mean, it takes place during like May 2020, so it's like the height of like when COVID was starting, and I think it uses it as that setting and that time as a vehicle to talk about a lot of, you know, political and societal things that are going on still currently. And I just feel like it just doesn't do enough with it to warrant it like happening during that time period. It just feels somehow at the same time too surface level and too much at the same time. And what I mean by that is so many characters and so many people throw out these dialogue that are like buzzer words and these like topics that we're definitely all familiar with, especially as Americans, but it feels like there's no depth to it. And then it's also like these really, really like bold assertments that have like nothing to them, and it just had me. I literally was sitting there like every time there was like a big discussion, I would just sit there like this. I was like, oh my god, like I just was like rolling my eyes and like sighing, and it just felt so like. And then too, I think the movie kind of, I'll get into it in spoilers more, but I think it kind of accidentally aligns itself with stuff that it's trying to speak out against. I can't really say too much on that in the spoiler-free section without spoiling the movie, but it starts to feel a little red pill, and I think it's trying to do the opposite, but by the missteps of the writing and who are like protagonists, it feels like it's aligning itself with that. And that kind of goes into my next point. Ari Aster is light skinned. He is light complected. So I did do some research before I wanted to speak on this fully. I don't know if this is 100% correct, but in my research, I believe he is Jewish. So, you know, he is of, you know, a group of people that have faced some, well, not some, but you know what I mean, it has had their fair share of troubles as a group. But there was just some stuff in this movie that I felt like coming from a person, like someone not of color, just felt really like, but girl, why are you the one to say it? Which was so interesting too, because there were so many characters that were getting made fun of for that exact thing in the movie, but at the same time, it coming from him just felt a little, I don't know if anybody else felt that watching it, but for me, I was just a little bit like, I don't really know if that's really working for me. And then also, like the second act onwards, they introduced these indigenous characters and also this like indigenous kind of situation, because the Eddington town is like right on the border of what I'm assuming is a reservation, some type of sovereign land from this tribe. Now, if you didn't know, I am an indigenous person myself. I am a Chumash native, and I don't know if I'm being extra in saying this, and if maybe I'm doing too much, but me as an indigenous person, I felt a little like icky, I'm not gonna lie. Like it felt a little like, it didn't feel racist by any means, but it just felt a little bit like it just doesn't do enough to warrant that conversation. So I felt a little bit like, not necessarily misrepresented, but just a little like, I don't know if we needed this. I don't know if we needed this. And then lastly, in spoiler free, usually this is what I talk about first, but the acting and the characters. Joaquin Phoenix is the lead. He is the sheriff in Eddington, and my God, his character, the acting, fine. The acting, he acts it very well, but this character is just so unlikable. And I've notably like said on this channel that I don't need main characters to be like good people or be likable people for like, you know, the movie to be good. In fact, I find movies that have kind of unlikable, morally incorrect protagonists to be like the more interesting films. But this character, the problem with him is you have no stakes in him, really. I feel like you just don't really care, like and I feel like also in today's climate, having him be the protagonist in this movie really almost like saying nothing. It just, staying with him for 2.5 hours really feels like a chore, when Pedro Pascal's character, this mayor, is a lot more interesting and likable, and we don't really see him that much. Like, he really is a wasted character in this movie, to the point where we're spending so much time with Joaquin Phoenix's character that you're like begging. I'm like, oh my God, put Pedro back on my screen, girl. Like, I can't be here anymore. Furthermore, Emma Stone and Austin Butler are also in this movie, and I could not fucking tell you why, because their characters, Emma's character is maybe 5 minutes of screen time altogether, maybe, and then Austin Butler's even less, like maybe like 3. And my point is, I'm like, why did we build these actors in these roles when these characters are not fleshed out, their storylines go nowhere? It's just like, why even, you know, like, I don't know, like, it was very disappointing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Austin and Emma did great in the roles, but like, what was the reason? So yeah, I mean, honestly, that's kind of all I can really say, spoiler free, at least. It didn't work, y'all. It really didn't work for me. I know for some people they're like, oh my God, it's a masterpiece, and that those opinions kind of surprise me, because I know, you know, this is something else I've discussed in this channel. I think, you know, artist subjective films, oh sorry, there's a hair in my mouth. Artist subjective films are like subjective, like people are allowed to like what they like and dislike what they dislike, but I really don't understand those opinions personally, because I think there's just some very big noticeable issues with this film, and honestly, I don't know if this is like a wild take, but I can't help but feel those who do praise this movie and really like it are probably the same crowd that was really into Opus. And my point there is, I feel like for some people, the thesis is more important than the actual film making and like film quality, even if that thesis goes nowhere and is not well fleshed out or well written. Just the point, like the objective that was trying, like what the objective was supposed to be, like what was supposed to be said, is enough for them to be like, oh my God, this is like great, just because it was trying to make that point. And I feel like both Opus and both Eddington have that issue, but for some people that is enough for it to be praised. That's just my personal take. I don't know. That's that on that for what I have to say. So all of that out of the way, I will be moving into spoiler territory. So if you do wish to watch this movie for yourself, turn back now, because if you thought I was critical already, girl, we're about to really get into it. So getting more specific into what I didn't like about this is, every single plot line goes essentially nowhere, and the ones that do go somewhere just feel like, okay, and like what, okay, so let's get into like Emma Stone's character. Emma Stone is Joaquin Phoenix's, the sheriff's wife. She has this really potentially interesting backstory with Pedro Pascal's character, the mayor. There is this whole like drama we discover that there's some like alleged allegations made by Emma's mother that like there was misconduct there. But when I tell you, that is literally the extent of what we discover about that. And there is a point in the film where Emma like denies the allegations like publicly and says there's not real, but we never find out like what the allegations actually are really. We never hear from Pedro about them really, like a little bit, but we just never really go beneath the surface of it. And I feel like it adds almost nothing to the plot other than Joaquin Phoenix getting slapped by Pedro at some point, which is honestly probably the best scene. That was the only time I went like, and it just goes nowhere. Like several of the plot lines just go nowhere. There's this whole thing where they're like setting up this black cop, and obviously, you know, I don't really need to get into the political discourse there, but that kind of goes nowhere. There's this whole thing about this, like, I don't even really understand, I'm gonna be honest, but this like solar company or like tech company or something coming into the town, but it's also like in the middle of the native land and their land, and that's what opens the movie and what closes the movie. And I really didn't understand. I'll be honest, that one probably just went over my head, but I also still feel like it served no purpose to the plot. Austin Butler's character is also like this evangelical kind of like influencer, like very like modern, like Jim Jones kind of tea, I guess is the best comparison I can make. And Emma's character kind of like gets infatuated with him and she runs off with him and stuff, but that kind of just goes nowhere. Like this movie, like all the plot lines just have no real like resolution. Like it's just, I don't know, like none of it works. And jumping off of that into this is also characters just like die, and it feels like what was the reason, like what was like a lot of the characters are just like dead, and it just feels like their storylines went nowhere. It also feels like, why did they die? Because this, I guess this point kind of goes into my other point, which I really wrote in my notes, what in the Antifa, because Antifa just fucking shows up in this movie at the end, or seemingly Antifa, that's what it feels like it implies, and they just start killing people in the town. Like they just start, you know, they're hunting down Joaquin Phoenix's character because of this like injustice that happened, and which goes back to, that's why I'm saying my points coincide. Characters just die. The whole reason Antifa rolls up and is pursuing Joaquin Phoenix, I think, if I can recall correctly, is Pedro Pascal's character gets assassinated by Joaquin Phoenix, and it's just like out of nowhere. It like so Pedro's character just goes nowhere, and it just happens, and it's not even, I just kind of sat there like, all right, like, okay. So they show up and they just start killing a whole bunch of people in this town that are like, it's people from both sides of the political discourse, and one random cop that was from the Pueblo native land, he just died, so his storyline also goes nowhere because he was the only person that was like kind of like putting it together that Joaquin Phoenix had killed Pedro Pascal. So it just was so like, what is the purpose of all of this? So honestly, I feel like this review is all over the place, and I feel like I'm probably missing a lot of stuff, but there's just so much like that just didn't work, and there's just so much movie that I really don't know how to just like cover all that ground. I think the awards contender Brian, he made a really great review of this film where I think he probably touched upon some things that I didn't. It's a little bit more concise, but you know, on my channel I do make my notes, but it's a little bit more freeform. So yeah, this movie didn't work for me. I just think it was a mess. I agree with Mr. Brian. I think it was an Ari Aster disaster. I really hate being that critical of his work, but it was a painful watch. Like, I really wanted to leave the theater, and I kept checking my watch and being like, oh my god, what do you mean there's still like an hour and a half of this movie? So yeah, that is my review of Eddington. I'm sorry I'm putting out a video that's like so critical. It's not really the point of this channel, you know, just to discuss film, but I don't want to like tear anything down. I don't think I am tearing anything down, you know, I am coming at this with like good faith and just honestly reviewing the movie. I don't really think I'm bashing on it per se, but I just don't really have a lot of good things to say about it. But so that being said, I'm just gonna leave it there. Did you watch it? What did you think? Stay tuned for my next reviews, which are movies that I'm really anticipating. So hopefully they'll be a little bit more positive. But until then, I will see you in the next one.